Yep, it's me. I'm back. Thank you, Tony, Pete, Eric, Rob. So just to finalize this webinar, I'm just going to try and knit some things back together, but then just get us to reflect on what we've heard. And then when do you plan for this stuff? So if we could go to the next slide, please. So hold it there. Okay, what have we been talking about? We want to present a flight path through APQP that brings these, some people call them tools. We refer to them in APQP as elements. They're key deliverables, and there's a set of these. And in the application of APQP, you can operate left to right flight, and you can apply these elements. Now, the truth is different types of situations, types of change, a transfer versus a brand new design coming into your business, as in a new engineering design being developed, a method change, and so on. That will mean that certain things do apply and certain things don't apply. Now, there is a webinar I pointed to at the first early section in here. We discussed that a bit more, and there is stuff which is coming out from the APQP PPAP SMIG group, which is going to be some simple descriptions of scenarios and when different elements apply to help you more. But what we've been talking today is give you this common thread, a common flight path at element level, the lower level of APQP, and just start flagging up the interconnections between certain elements we've picked out. In the wide the full spread of elements, there are 27 we quote in RM 13145, plus we indicate there's 2 optional additional ones. So at a full count, we're talking 29 in total. That's the language we want to keep promoting. If you keep thinking about these elements are deliverables that are applied at points in time during APQP, it then makes it easier to understand things like the details within these standards. Because at a detail level, there can be lots of words, lots of described requirements around these individual elements, but at a higher level, think of these as deliverables at points in time. So I want to talk about planning. When do you do planning? The flight path we described is what you've flown through to get to the end game, which is production launch. But you need to plan ahead of that, and that means at the point of PDR in APQP, one of the key deliverables of the planning phase is what's called the project plan. And in the context of what we've talked about today, you should be thinking hard about, at that point, look ahead and how do we plan these elements and the application of those. Now, when you get into the details of planning, there's lots of things to think about in the terms of who's involved, risks, statements of work, a whole raft of things. But I want to just keep this in a simple context. So we've pointed out a number of these elements that really support building in controls within the manufacturing process. We've shown you a thread, a flight path through how these connect together. What we are missing is certain levels of timing relationships. What you will find is, and the illustrator on the left-hand side is the diagram, which is in 31, the very first section, very first diagram you'll find in chapter C of 3100. And this maps out connections between a selection of these elements. So not all the ones which we flag up within 13145, but it's a subset level of those. That diagram is talking about connections of elements. What it's not portraying is a level of relationship in timing. And there's a particular reason why there's a note on that diagram I've highlighted, because it points you to something called the APQP and PPAP timing plan. You can download those. You can download this document from the supplements page on the Aero Engine Supplier Quality site. We can point you to that sort of information. Could you reveal the next bit, please? This document looks like this, and the reason we present it in this manner is what you'll find is it's constructing, it's listing out all these elements, and then it's mapping against events. I mentioned the word events previously. It's giving a notional start and finish point for activities that should be going on around these elements. Now it's notional. It's a guide. You know, it's not an absolute. But what is really important is that you do aim to finish these elements at the right hand side relationship to events. In other words, the point when they should be delivered. This becomes a really helpful aid right at the front in advance of PDR and helping plan this stuff. So we've highlighted some of the elements. This highlights all the elements, but it gives you, for those elements that we've talked about in this flight path, it gives you a decent understanding of start and finish points for when you should be thinking about what to do. The devil's in the detail, and your plans would actually have the key activities that enable this. The important thing I think also to flag up about this is, even though we present this as a flight path, we could appear to be a series of elements taking place. There is a level of concurrence. So in other words, if you could reveal the next piece, please. If I was to take the left-hand side, and what we've been talking about as an example, process FMEA, the truth of application is on the right-hand side, which is the timing relationship. And you see that as a long bar. And that is a long bar which has other bars next to it. In other words, there's a level of concurrency going on. So I find from discussing with our suppliers, the supply chain personnel, that they find this is a really useful template to give a shadow board on the plan that's taking place. So we promote this as a really helpful aid for when you're thinking about planning on this. Again, I mentioned a former webinar. You can access the actual webinar itself. The videos are posted on the past events page, and it discusses more about this and more about thinking about planning and how you pick elements, etc. If you could reveal the next piece then, please. So key message is, when do we plan for this stuff? We plan for it in advance of PDR, and we want a plan that then talks about real timing of how you go through this flight path. Bigger image of the APQP timing plan. The point here is that what is also important is, once the plan's in place, that you have a decent assurance method going forwards. Now, this is another value of events as well, APQP events. What they offer you is in-flight checks, checkpoints at time about the quality of what's going on, how things are going, and so on. If you could reveal one more, I'm going to use one event as an example. It was mentioned earlier, and it's the production readiness review event. It's sitting about 2/3 the way over on this diagram. That isn't necessarily the real life timing on what's taking place in APQP, but what it does do is it gives a checkpoint between the phase 3 and phase 4 transition point. And what it does is, and the form, between our member companies, we've agreed a standardized form. If you've not seen it, we're not going to flash up on screen now, but it's worth downloading a copy off the supplements page. And what it does is it catalogues a number of key check questions to think about. And the way I would summarize those questions is, first of all, it starts getting you to look back. What I mean by look back, look on the left-hand side of this event, and it's getting you to think about the phase 2 and 3 deliverables. And an example of that is the elements that have been involved, and are they adequate? Has the right work taken place and the quality of work taken place? And ultimately, in the context of what we're talking today, has that been the right level of work to really plan in zero defects into the process? The other thing it then does is, at that point in time, it says, now, are we production prepared? In other words, have we got adequate resources, environments, etc., all the resources you need to manufacture the product itself, tools, machines, facilities and stuff. So it acts as another checkpoint saying, at this point in time, is that in place? Is it planned for? Is the timing right for it? Why is that? Because the next piece it asks is, let's look forwards, and have you planned the validation pieces? And when we talk about validation, you can summarize that as the production process run activities, some of the evidence we talk, some of the information and data and stuff what's been comes from that has been talked about, initial process studies, SPC data, dimensional, non-dimensional results. We've talked about that. And what this is doing is saying, have we planned ahead? Along with first article and then ultimate the PPAP submission and disposition of that. So the key messages for today in regards to planning is there's a simple template which helps many start bringing together how do these things work concurrently. It's a nice, useful tool. You can get your hands on that. It's important to plan for this flight part we've talked about in advance of getting into the detail, which is PDR. So at the PDR point, think of PDR in the analogy of flight as that's our departure gate. After PDR, we're in flight. So what we want to do is make sure we've planned that flight well. And in terms of assurance, once we're in that flight, these events are really powerful in terms of what they can do and help us understand where we're at. An example of one is the production readiness review. If you want to understand more about these events, we'll be having other webinars in the future, but you can, within the RM 13145, you can refer to the appendices. It has a set of pass criteria in there for all these events. So that helps the team check out if they're on time with the plan. Next slide, please. So the little piece to wrap up on here before we dive into questions, and our point of reflection is, what we've talked about so far is APQP. We're not talking PPAP. We're actually talking APQP. And what do I mean by that? I position APQP and PPAP in this simplistic way. APQP is driving the activities that need to take place. So what's PPAP? PPAP's the evidence of compliance on some of those deliverables. So the visual you see on here is we've got the timing plan on the left-hand side. That is notionally mapping out when activities should be going on against these elements. The list of elements, if you haven't picked up, is what you see on the right-hand side, and that table of lines, the dark blue and the light blue lines. Those are all the different elements, and I flagged one up a moment ago, which was the process FMEA element, and highlighted that there's an initial point when it should be starting. You can start earlier. Just because this might point at a certain time, it's fine to start earlier, but what's really important is to get these deliverables into a satisfactory and adequate state at the point on the right-hand side when they should be delivered. The mapping, the picture what the picture is denoting here on the right-hand side is that we're talking about a number of elements. At this point in time, it doesn't matter about which one's which against each number. The main message here is the elements drive the activities. When we talk about PPAP, we're looking for evidence of compliance. So PPAP is about evidence. It is not the driver of the activities. It is part of the assurance makeup of APQP. And at a point in time, on the right-hand side, we expect a disposition of what's called the PPAP submission. And the PPAP submission, very simplistically, is the evidence for certain elements. Which ones are those? They're the ones marked up in the light blue. So out of the total number of APQP elements, a number of those are used as evidence for PPAP. APQP, activity, PPAP, evidence. That's a really important message. Now, some of the things we've helped with Rev A coming out and the RM manuals is those of you who have been spotting the detail in there, when you actually see anything referring to PPAP and the numbering convention, you'll actually see details like anything that's a number relates to the APQP aspect. Anything that has a P reference to it says that's for PPAP. So if you also download, if you haven't seen this timing plan, you will see those references in there. It actually has one column, says all the numbers 0 to 27, and then on the right hand side of it, it gives P references. So we're trying to also make this a little simpler in terms of how we understand this. One more reveal, please, before we go over to the wrapping this up. Okay, key message. I was lucky enough to get involved with this stuff in 2011. My journey so far has been contributing to the writing initially of AS 9145. I have seen the journey in Rolls-Royce since those early days, and I'm still part of that journey, and I really value that, the experience I've gained. One lesson I've absolutely learned is we need to make the message clear to everybody. Activities are delivered by APQP. Therefore, if you do APQP well, PPAP, production launch, is an easy approval. And that is really important to take away as a message. Today, we've presented a low-level flight path aimed at building process control in the manufacturing process. APQP is not solely about that. It gives it other bigger outcomes. It has many other elements that provide other key deliverables. Today, we want to present to you a flight path through APQP. We hope it's been really helpful for you. Final messages on this would be, please go away with the thought of APQP is the activity driver, PPAP is the evidence. Please do not think PPAP is the driver of this. It's an outcome. Really important on that one. Next one, right. So I've been lucky enough to, I thought we had a Slido question in here. Okay. We do have a Slido question. Thank you for that. Right, just before we go to sort of Q&A, what we'd really value is just for you to take a moment, breathe in, think about how it's gone, and just give us a feel. How would you rate how much learning you've gathered today? We're not here to stroke our egos or anything. This really gives us an informed understanding of, are we pitching this in the right way? Because we want to keep doing this for our supply chain. Remember, this was free. We all give our time up to do this stuff. The gold books, the RMs, they're all free as well. Why do we put so much energy into this stuff and giving it is because we all want to be successful with this. So we do value your feedback on giving us an idea on how much you feel you've learned today, really of value. And I will add the caveat, we're not trying to spot your names in here. We're not going to come after you if you've scored it in any way. We just really value the feedback. It's helpful for us. So I'm just playing a little bit more time, just to allow you to just put some responses back into the Slido. It helps us, and we value this feedback. I will give it a final moment for people just to, you obviously weren't ready for that last Slido. You've probably got your phones out again and scanned the QR code, but that's great, just giving us that sort of feedback.